Alright everyone, it appears that Israeli forces, whether they were authorized to do so or not, there's some confusion at least situationally, have begun desecrating cemeteries in the Gaza Strip, that is, in some cases literally disinterring bodies. Now, one statement they made was, hey, we're looking for the remains of, hostages that have been killed, so we got to plow out this cemetery because we think that Hamas killed these people and buried them here in this graveyard. There are probably better solutions than doing that, because cemetery desecration, number one, would generally be conceived of as a war crime. Not that they'll be held accountable for it, but diplomatically it's unhelpful. Again, Israel is losing the optics war at this point and has been now for several months. You just surpassed 25,000 deaths in Gaza, mostly civilian. You had the U.S. report saying, only about 20-30% of Hamas militants have actually been killed. It's going to be a real long slog then, because at that rate you'd have to kill like 100,000 more people in order to get all of the Hamas agents. You can, it's just, again, at some point you're going to have the international community completely abandon you and condemn you. Optically, I don't know what the fuck the point is. Some of the cemeteries were just bombed. So, you're firing rockets and missiles and dropping bombs and shit. Inevitably, you're going to damage it. In an area that concentrated, you're going to do damage. But in some cases, it looks like deliberate desecration. Like the troops went in and started, lobbing grenades at the gravestones and shit. And so those have been wrecked. And again, they're saying, we're trying to find certain human remains, but I don't know how effective a strategy that is. In war, crazy shit happens. The problem is when you're a state actor with a diplomatic presence, generally recognized as a state by the world's community, especially in the West, and you're fighting a militant group, a non-state entity of much smaller size, with a massively lopsided death toll at this point. It's like a 20-to-1 or thereabouts. When a significant proportion of the dead are civilians, and then you begin massacring the dead. I mean, what are you trying to do? Eliminate any potential Democratic Party voters in the area of Gaza? That would, I guess, they won't be on they won't be voting for the next incarnation of the Knesset for the liberal movements there in Israel. But I'm struggling to understand what the point is. You have to know that you're going to be observed doing this. Certainly Hamas has damaged gravestones. They don't give a shit either. But again, you're a state actor. You have a diplomatic presence. Unfortunately, potentially, you're expected to act with a form of restraint that a non-state actor that's not really recognized diplomatically would not be expected to do. Now, you may say, well, that's unfair. You're fighting with one hand tied behind your back. Yeah, but you've all got all the toys that make the noise. Hamas, by and large, their air force is paragliders. Their navy is wooden rafts and fishing vessels, and their military is a few tens of thousands of people, mainly using small arms and primitive rockets. That's Hamas's military capability. The IDF has over 100,000 well-trained, and at this point mainly battle-hardened troops, plus militia, of course, tanks and mortars and Stinger missiles and Iron Dome and all of these things, and very likely a number of nuclear weapons. You're going to be asked to act, therefore, differently than the people that you're fighting, especially when you have effectively open-endedly annexed the area that you're currently in. If you intend to take over the direct governance of the area, but your troops are desecrating graveyards, well, apparently a significant proportion of Gaza's landscape is now at least damaged, if not outright goddamn rubble, with the entire population of 2 million people internally displaced, power just barely being restored to certain areas where most of these internal refugees are, and at this point they are refugees, these civilians, these aren't Hamas fighters. I mean, at some point you've lost the optics war so badly, even the United States won't be able to shield you diplomatically. Even Biden's beginning to complain. Biden loves war. Biden wanted to sit back and watch the explosions. Even he's had to say, well, it's kind of unacceptable that you're rejecting our plan for a eventual two-state solution or a hostage deal. We had protests the other day in Israel itself by people who, the people who have family members hostage in Palestine. They're like, just fucking sign the deal. Now, the deal, of course, is not going to be signed because Netanyahu would be committing political suicide in so doing, because the deal called for the repatriation of all hostages and a full withdrawal from Gaza by Israel. In the power vacuum left behind, if you were to do that, it'd make the situation actually worse. But I'm not sure what blowing up graveyards has to do with Israel's larger strategy, unless the whole concept is to make people as miserable as possible. Again, I would point out, when those people filter back into their old home areas, let's see, your home is gone, your cousin got a leg blown off, your mom's dead, and the tombs of your grandparents have been disinterred, and you had to see their, mummified skeletons poking out of the soil, and now you got to rebury the fuckers. It probably makes a person more likely to join Hamas, or at the very least support Hamas, as opposed to saying, well, what a fair war, and all's well that ends well, and let's go back to herding my goats, or something. I mean, they died too, but I can always get new ones, and the international community will send in a shipment. Maybe I can get a couple and breed them. Or I'm going to go back to my olive, orchard. Oh, that's been all burned up by napalm. But then my mom had a vineyard. I inherit that. But oh shit, the vineyard got blasted too, and is full of landmines from Hamas and the IDF. You can understand that a person under such a situation, especially if they're on the young side, is going to be enraged. You've basically just created the next generation of Hamas super soldiers, actually. They're going to be angrier than ever because now you've got this enormous blistering attack by Israel in retaliation for what was an unprovoked and preemptive strike by Hamas, taking numerous people hostage and slaughtering civilians at random in Israel and in border areas. That much is true. The problem is the response is ongoing, disproportionate, extremely expensive, time-consuming. You've lost Israeli troops too. A number of them have died in the fighting. Although a lot of it takes place by air and stuff. Hamas doesn't really have that many anti-tank capabilities. They don't really have that much in the way of anti-air capabilities either. It'd be funny if you got like a weird, like a shortwave broadcast message. It's the Hamas high command saying, scramble the fighters, and then all of a sudden like a dozen paragliders fly out to meet some helicopter or something like that. It's so disproportionate though at this point, Israel cannot help but lose the optics war. If it had any possibility of salvaging itself, when you get reports like this, it's going to predispose people to opposing your military action. Israel can go it alone and go rogue as long as it wants to. It's got that military capability. Eventually, though, it will get ground down diplomatically and isolated economically and no longer be capable of functioning at the same level. The big worry is that the other nations in the region therefore get involved and attack Israel, and they invoke the Samson option or something like that. They go full scorched earth with nuclear weapons. Stranger things have happened in the history of warfare. Netanyahu is clearly going to try to remain in power. If he feels threatened in such a way, he might be tempted to launch strikes on neighboring countries. And I don't mean, hey, we killed a couple dudes from Hezbollah across the Lebanese border because they fired on an IDF border position or something. But I mean a wider regional conflict. It's already beginning to spiral out of control. Iran has struck targets. The Syrians are almost involved. The Houthis are already involved. They've declared war against Israel and are attacking U.S. vessels and European vessels indiscriminately in that region. You've had Iran attacking targets and seizing ships on their side in the Persian Gulf. You've also got pirates to look out for in the region. You've got all sorts of problems. It's a powder keg. It risks a very wide regional war that at some point would become so butcherous other countries in the West and probably East Bloc nations would both jointly get involved. Can we really occupy half of the Levant in order to keep it at a sensible level of just simmering violence? I don't think that that's a great idea, so hopefully somebody listens to diplomacy and reason. Holy Land, my ass. That's about all. Peace out.